starts with Israel attacking Iran. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. The idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets. And because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries.
Think quite carefully about the conscription. Think quite carefully about the conscription. Think quite carefully about the conscription.
Say no.
Think quite carefully about the conscription.
They simply say no. And that's what we all should do. Because this will end if we simply say no. what we're here to do today. They simply say no. And that's what we should do. Because this will end if we simply say no. No.
If a white male goes to war, women will be left. Women will be left. Women will be left.
And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries. And then, he said, then the real war starts.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Ooh, what a week. Ooh, the visit to Washington, D.C. by the big fat fingers. Ooh, so many things to talk about. Now, the plan was tonight to do a session on that, then go through 2 documents. I have just received something maybe an hour ago that, having read it, I have to expand on the King's visit somewhat, because listening to so many of these American outlets now talking about this, it's pretty clear people can see that there's been an handover of power, which of course began with the Queen when Trump broke protocol and walked in front of her. That was clearly the first sign. Then we had the symbolism of the 2 horses running down, was it the Mall, one-blooded. So there's a massive amount of symbolism been going on since the Queen's visit. And along comes Charlie Boy. Now, there's a lot of data out there now where they are pretty much saying that it looks like it's been handed back to America. But this is the ruse, and it's against the Americans, this ruse. It's so slight. But the data I've just received has really expanded the way I can approach this tonight. And it's unrehearsed, as in I've only just come to it, so hopefully it will make sense. But if there's any race needs to see this, it's America, because they really are being fed by all these shill outlets to believe that they're back on par, they've got the freedom fulfilled after the War of Independence, etc. Everything's going to be glorious. I don't think so, chaps. This is the breakup of everything of the old world in readiness to install this no-hide system. And it's being done in such a way, it's quite ridiculous, I have to say. But hopefully it's going to be a little bit more obvious when we get through this first session. Now, the second part I want to do is an interesting video, which is based on the memoirs of a prison guard, ex-military guy in America, in the late 1800s, who became very friendly with one of this particular inmates who just happened to be a 9-foot-something giant. And it's basically the discussions had over a period of years between the prison guard and this giant. Now, I've cut out a lot of it because it's not really important, but if we want to really get a grip of this idea of giants, etc., because we know they exist, we know the Smithsonian have been collecting all these skeletons as soon as they're found, because so they've been hiding this reality without a doubt. We also know the amount of buildings that have huge doors. For what purpose? you can only imagine if it's for, your average height human. Well, he goes into a bit of detail about all this stuff, but what I really started to recognise is taking on board as well the data that's been put forward by the Russian Alexander Fomenko, where he goes into great detail about how they've mishmashed incidents and events that have happened in specifically Anatolia and transplanted them onto England, and they've done the same in other places. But one thing he's adamant throughout is that they've added 1,000 years to our chronology. So that being said, we're looking at the events of Yeshua 1,000 years ago. We're looking at the fall of Rome in the mid-1400s, which just happens to be the same point at which they removed the Plantagenets off England and installed the Tudors. It's been cited that perhaps the late 1400s is when the old Roman system, which we've said before was basically monastic, it was all carried out in the monasteries, is the point at which Rome, the Vatican, took on this atrocious interpretation of the gospel they called Christianity. So in that sense, that instituted the fall of Rome in the mid-1400s, if we're going to go with this revised chronology scenario. And everything has gone downhill ever since. But also with the giant, it's interesting because he cites a huge event that took place at the beginning of the 1800s. So huge and natural, well, we're suggesting, it was earthquakes first, but it changed the atmosphere. And from that change in the atmosphere is where these giant folk struggled to exist, because the earth changed. And us short asses managed to survive through that. But it's interesting, and it would, it was so huge, this catastrophe across America, across Europe. This is where we have the idea of the mud floods, because from the great earthquakes then came a great flood and left its mud everywhere. And we know that happened in Egypt or North Africa because it was once green and has been sand for a very long time. There's references to the fact that the whole of that landmass was flooded. There's even evidence way back before that the Mediterranean wasn't actually a sea, it was actually a landmass. And obviously as the Atlantic raised itself, poof, it piled in and they had a sea. So there's all sorts of interesting data to be had out there if you sort of spread your mind a bit on all sorts of subjects. But this visit by this king, I put the speech up on the Facebook. I thought, well, if people are interested, they can watch it for themselves. But the two things that really, really got under my skin listening to that speech. First, you've got Charles bigging up Magna Carta. Consistently through his speech, he's, trying to re-cement this relationship between America and England. Well, he doesn't say England, he says Britain, but then he's citing Magna Carta, which is England, it's nothing to do with Britain. And how it's a duty of him, he said, and America to continue to uphold the rights and liberties brought to us in the Magna Carta. But yet, on this side of the pond, we're having a shit show called Sharia law installed. So, chameleon isn't the word, and that really ruffled my feathers somewhat. I've recently watched Robin Hood's Adventures in the Courts. I have said before, I've listened to Robin Hood stuff. For me, there's just parts that I'm not that excited. He hasn't come to terms with yet. And so I haven't given his work a massive study. So, in all fairness, I can't say yeah or nay, whichever. But clearly on this latest thing that I've watched, he's come to understand the same as I have, that in this last year things have really buckled down and changed again. And in his example, they weren't accepting Bill of Rights, nothing, not even a constitutional monarch. So I found that rather interesting, but it's good that he's getting and coming to that stage of just realising that things have changed so dramatically in this last year. And I think you can cite it to when the Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill was put forward in its first instance, because they appeared to be starting to act in accordance with it as though it was law. It is now law. It is now an act, rather. Well, let's not call it law. It is now on the statute books. And yeah, so there's so that really ruffled my little feathers. And then the second, which really ruffled my feathers, was the fact that he made a big speech about how important Christianity is in his daily life, citing our, of course, to interconnect with the Americans, knowing full well that the entire Congress is full of Christian Zionists. So that, in and of itself, given his rhetoric over his entire time as Prince of Wales, is a nonsense. But what really got me gold was the fact that we've just gone through an Easter where he decided not to acknowledge Christianity at all at Easter, and yet presented a speech for this Sharia, foreign entity on this land. And those 2 points so piss me off. It's just, I mean, what is he playing at? Why would they think they can get away with that, knowing full well his speech was going to be global? Do they really just not care? Well, let's try and examine what's happening. It's clear that there's been a major shift now, and that the inner city of London, which controls everything, is relinquishing its full control, it would appear, over Washington, D.C. We've already explored in the past how it looks like the City of London is going to move to Kazakhstan, along with the One World Government. So it would appear that the Noahide cult is going to be centred in Kazakhstan. The symbolism's there in Astana. You can look at it yourself. I have done a full report on it. We can put that up under this video for you to peruse if you've not seen it. So we know they're breaking up as is. And we also know that there's a lot going on in the East in relation to, it seems to be shifting over. There's a lot of and ahhing as to what Trump's actually doing at the moment. There's suggestions that they are going to try and play a blinder to lessen the 38 trillion debt by coming forward and revaluing gold at 20,000 an ounce, which would, I think, recoup 13% of the national debt just on that alone. And that if the rest of the world took that on, because of course they've been hoarding gold, Turkey, Poland, China, Russia, they've been hoarding gold like you wouldn't believe. But also Italy, France, we've all been hoarding gold. And of course, it would be a bit of a carrot on a stick if Trump was to suggest that he was raising it to 20,000. On the one hand, it would satisfy the default debt because it would make it look like it's been massively reduced, because it would have been, but it's just a magic trick. But the other side of that is all these other countries that own all this gold, they're going to see their balance sheet raised by about 400%. But it still comes back to the dollar. It's just going to become worthless. So there's all sorts of ideas. We can also see clearly that oil as another mineral commodity is also in this mix. Putin's talking about oil tied to a new digital dollar, which I believe he's going to announce in the next week or so. Trump and Putin have had a big conversation and decided that everything that's going on in the Ukraine is the fault of Europe, specifically UK. when in fact we all know what really took place in 2014 under Obama is they took it over entirely and created a lot of nasty things in the Ukraine. And it affected Russia, which of course that was the plan all along. So there's a massive shift going on between Trump and Putin. And now he's announced he's going to start to remove troops from Europe. So it does look to me like Uncle Donald and Uncle Vlad, the Impaler, as I've said all along, are working together because they both have Chabad Lubavitch in the logo, which just also happens to be controlling the spiritual essence of the leaders of Israel under the Rebbe's theology, which is in sync with Jacob Frank and before him Sabbatai Sevi. Do sin to bring in the Messiah. But as I said the other week, I'm not so sure that these rabbinical... I mean, we keep calling them Jews. It's pretty clear that these elites are not Jews. This is a club that goes way back in time. And it's gained control over everybody by gaining control over what we know as the biblical tradition. And as I said earlier, you know, this, what we call Christianity, whether it's Protestant or even Catholic, when you actually study the gospel, every single part of the theologies of both is a direct contradiction to the message of the man. All of it. Because he makes it clear. If you're seeking the image that's implanted in man, or the kingdom of the Creator, then you would seek that image within because it's there. You just have to express it. That's the message. And it's an older message even than that. And yet, these institutions, be the Protestantism, whatever denomination you might call it, do not operate in that. They're contrary to that because they're saying, come out yourself and come to us. We're the ones you need to pass go. So if that, as I said earlier, is correct, that actually 1,000 years has been added, Rome didn't fall until the mid-1400s, when they took on this rather spurious interpretation they call Christianity, then something serious has taken place, which has given the slave mind, you might say, the lower ranking humans, the ability to take over what was civilization. Now, for that to take place, clearly the leaders of that old civilization had started to act contrary to the spiritual law that civilization was set on, in the same way of Atlantis. We know, for all its might and power, once it started to misuse it, then it lost its spiritual protection and it collapsed. Well, if Rome changed tack and then took on this fable, then again, that system... And of course, Abe Finkel sounded very clear that they've been in it since the beginning. Well, was the beginning that he's talking about, did that only take place in the mid-1400s? So this week's been a rather heightened week of just reevaluating quite a lot of data that I have available to me, and just trying to reform it in relation to what's going on today, what new stuff seems to be coming out, and the fact that this Tartaria as a civilization, global perhaps, is definitely getting a lot more leg work out there, and people are starting to pick it up because America is full of it. So much happened in America during these earthquakes and mud floods that we just don't really see what was actually there before, even though there are maps to show these cities that we think are new were there way before this intrusion by Holy Roman Empire through France, through the British Empire, through the Dutch, operating the East India Companies. Of course, knowing full well that the purveyors of those actions are those that were crediting it, the Venetians. Okay, so anyway, that aside, I was going to do a follow-on as the second piece was going to be the How to Build a Nation, which was a follow-on from the AI conversation I had before, but I don't think we'll get to that because of the expanded data now that we're going to have to look at in relation to Charles's visit to Washington, D.C., which is a sovereign state. However, what's Trump gone and done? Trump has militarized that sovereign state. So it's now under total military control. It's no longer, you might say, classed as a sovereign banking state. It's now a full-blown sovereign military headquarters for the military-industrial complex. And we can see a lot of new weaponry being playing out all across the Middle East as well, which is causing major problems for all sides outside those in the East that are using Iran as a proxy. Turkey's moved on the chessboard now, and you know, Netanyahu did say, or Milikowski did say a year or so ago, that the second most terrifying prospect for Israel is Turkey. And that said, Turkey's moved missiles into a position that's now put that firmly on the map. So they've not acted as in war, but they've made movements that suggest it's readying for war. So again, that's another interesting development that's taken place. There's a lot going on in around Taiwan. A lot. Trump's selling weapons all over the shore and bolstering the military abilities over there in the Pacific. And that doesn't get much leg room on the mainstream media. But there's a lot going on around Taiwan at the moment, and also Indonesia. So there's so much going on, and people are obviously focused in the West just to this Middle East garbage. So we're missing a lot, which is exactly what these things are used for, aren't they? The diversions to keep you off the real game. So we'll see who's joined us, then we'll get straight in and look at this visit by Charles to the new sovereign militarized headquarters for the military-industrial complex, Washington District of Columbia. So, who's joined us? PY Music says, good evening all, evening Paul. Observator says, evening lads, evening Observator. June says, evening Sean and chat, evening June. Anna Eximanda999 says, greetings, good evening to you. Paul says, good evening Sean. Mods chat and fellow mates, evening Paul. Anna Eximanda, Trump walked in front of Charles too. He did, yeah. I mean, and that symbolism is massive. You look at the colours around everything, a lot of gold, a lot of black and white. So it's hitting every little trick. So yeah, well said. Wayne says, hello everyone, hope all is well. Evening to you, Wayne. Nice to see you again. Yeah, I'm good. Jerry says, they think he's setting them free from the City of London. I know. Oh, and I've watched so many of these shill operators in this week on the back of watching that his speech, and you can see him moving the American mind to think that that's the case. And they're doing it so well. You know, these are well spoken. I'm an elitist gig, you know, looking superb. I've been in the political system forever. You must listen to me, and they are playing this up in a big way. But I am going to show you some data tonight that's going to, for Americans to see, that will piss that against the wall, because what they're saying to you is utter garbage. This is the dismantling of the West and its freedoms and putting it directly into the hands of this Exolarch system, which in itself, the Exolarch system isn't for the Jews, it's for non-Jews. That's what the Exolarch system is actually about. It's not even their system for them. It's their system set up for us, and then of course the control mechanic is the no-hide laws. But we'll have to get into that another time, because I did come into some data this week that's quite startling, and I'd have to expand on it to turn it into a gig. Right. Observator says Mountbatten doesn't receive the respect, and rightfully so. Savile's pal. Well, he were a raging paedophile, that fella. I mean, and what he used to do to Charles. Yeah, I mean, H. Holmes says, Jerry, and all my mates, you to you, Jerry. Anna says, you go doors, huge doors are there, to allow horsemen. You don't need a 15-foot, 20-foot door, joke, for horsemen. And why would you want horsemen going into some of these cathedrals? So, yeah, not having that, I'm afraid. Lex says, evening Sean and all, evening Lex, where have you been? Not seen you for quite a while. Any chance you can put the mic a bit closer to the mouth? Everybody says this. I'm a bit stuck at the minute. I'm going to have to get myself a new stand because it just doesn't stay in place anymore. So where I could have it right up to my gob. Is that any better? Stock 51 says, evening all. Evening Stock 51. David Gregg says, sound is bad again, really. You see, it's weird that, because when I listen back to it, it's never bad. So I don't know whether it's YouTube messing around in the background or what. But I need to get a new stand so I can get this microphone a little bit closer, I think, unless I hold it and pretend I'm on stage. Back in old days. So, it's heavy. But anyway, never mind. Where are we here? Anna gives it the crown. Get ready for the new Anglo-American United Empire. Well, I think the BRICS nations might have something to say about that. We can see they're going to war. This is the next game. The message is that the king is held hostage in Britain, whereas he is free to speak in America. Okay, well, that makes sense, because as we explored last week, the Bar Association being a bank, or the power of the banks, is what's given Parliament sovereignty and is what's put the monarch underneath Parliament. Which is why Robin Hood had his issues in court, where they made it clear that they're not interested in a constitutional monarch, they're not interested in the Magna Carta or the Bill of Rights. So there may be a little bit of truth in that. Well, if that's the case, he needs to make it known when he comes back here, and we can all jump on board and be on his side. Because it only takes one monarch to say, look, guys, this is what's going on, let's have it, and we'll have it. But he'll have to cite England, because it's England's where we have all the power. It's got the treason laws, it's got the power for militia, it's our duty to service law, which means these Johnny-come-latelys called police are not there to service law. They're policy enforcers. They're all foreign agents on this land. But while the monarch hasn't got the balls, I mean, people used to say this when I used to decry Queen Elizabeth II after I took her to court, that I said, look, she's not doing her job. And, you know, the cry from a lot of quarters, like UK column, was that, oh, bless her, she has to do what her husband says, Prince Philip, he's in charge. And I said, well, then she's not fit for purpose then. You can't, the whole idea of having a monarch is to uphold our sovereignty. If they can't do that, they're not fit for purpose, regardless of how much you want to swoon and pretend everything's good. That's not how a constitutional monarchy works. But unless the constitutional monarch or one in the royal family is going to stand up and say, this is how it is, activate our military, then where are we going? Where are we going? Well, we know where we're going. We're going to have a civil war in this country. We're going to have a civil war in this country, and the state is going to be its own entity. It's not even going to back either side. It'll be ridiculous. It'll be a ridiculous state of affairs, this kind of civil war that they're building. It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. Train says, as shown and all dubious inmates, true, they've added 1,000 years on. I see a lot of evidence of that in Edinburgh on the buildings and graveyards. 887, the buildings dates, for example. Yeah, well, they say, don't they? I mean, but there's a lot of properties up in the north, I have to say, that 1667 and 1500s up like Ribchester, all these places that have massive heritage. They would have had to have changed the stone and added the one. I get you. So, again, you know, I've read his work, not all of his work, because there's a lot. And I get his drift. I can understand what he's saying. But you can't sit there and claim to know, can we? Because we don't know. We're guessing. We're learning. We're trying to work this out. So thanks for that, Treen. The Observer says, Charlie Boy was close to known pederast Lawrence Vanderpost, who had certain views on Islam and was a close friend and follower of Jung. Well, Carl Jung, if you read his... Because there's two sides to these people. If you read his real work, it's a little bit different. Treen says, here comes the Handmaid's Tale under the no-hide system. Well, I think the first game of that is to get rid of the white males and force our females to breed with these subcultures, these creatures that have been flung in here. Them Jungians are Luciferians, which fits the no-hide system, says Observator. We had our Orange no-hide revolution in 1688. We did indeed. Lex says, hey Sean, much better mate, thanks. I'm here every week, lol, using adblocker browser, so can't comment on there. Hope you're well. I'm very well, Lex, and it's good to know that you're still on there, because you haven't been on for a while, and you've been missed. And Kerry says, love from Ireland, evening Sam. Right, chaps, without further ado, let's have a look at this diatribe. And as I said, I've had a lot more data that I'm going to add, but I haven't had time to really go through it. But America. You need to see through these shills because it's everywhere across America. Every institution is now speaking about it. I've not seen Alex Jones. I don't know what Joe Rogan's saying about it or anything like that. But you really need to see this because what they're pushing is not what's happening, believe me. Right, where are we? Where are we? There we go. Okay. So there we have... Trump's got the red tie on. Interesting. Bit Diana-esque, them outfits on the flosses, aren't they? He just looks like plain Jane, doesn't he, old Charlie boy? Grey tie. Is he playing the grey? I don't know. What's the symbolism there? War Room. Royal arrival at the White House. Right. So the general consensus is Admiralty Law ending now, King to sign off in DC. Oh, you think so? The significance of the King's visit. The British King and Queen will visit America from April the 27th to the 30th as part of the final stages of the nation's dismantling of British Admiralty Law, a critical step required for America to legally restore its sovereign state. Stops will be made in Washington, D.C., the 9/11 Memorial and Virginia. Virginia is the base of a company that's now completely controlling the Met Police. So everything's been handed over to this American corporation. And that's, again, is not getting any airplay. But the company that now in full control and dictating how the Met Police in London operate is from a company in Virginia in the US. With each location holds specific symbolic and historical significance tied to Britain's long-standing system that has quietly governed America for well over a century. Well, Britain's system, you might call it, is the Holy See system. The process requires the living authority to appear in person at the exact centres of origin, control and operation. This legal requirement makes the Crown's participation mandatory as America fulfills the conditions to restore its sovereignty. Physical presence and public witness complete the legal record, with the King and Queen serving as the two living witnesses, providing full and lawful testimony that America has fulfilled the conditions necessary to restore its sovereign state. Well, if they were acting as witnesses, then it's pretty clear that this isn't what they've been removed from. They've been removed from the inner city, the Bar Association. But the Bar Association is still going on and playing its game in America. You've got to see through the spin, ladies and gentlemen. As the living head of the British Crown, he has governed America through Admiralty Law. The King carries the essential authority to lawfully sign off on the end of that system, the return of America's sovereignty and the shift back to the law of the land, which is what Charles made a big play about. Together, their appearance at the highest levels of governance creates a visible ceremonial confirmation that the corporate maritime system is being brought to its lawful end in America as its centres of power within the country. The visit begins where that power is currently concentrated. See, they're talking country when really it's still a corporation. King's visit to Washington, D.C. In 1871, Congress created the District of Columbia as a municipal corporation or a corporate entity. This corporation operates under Admiralty law, the law of the sea, also called commercial and maritime law under British jurisdiction. This is represented by the gold fringe flags in government buildings, which signifies Admiralty commercial jurisdiction rather than the original common law of the land. Washington, D.C. remains the administrative headquarters for the corporate United States, where contracts are executed, debts managed, and commercial rules enforced nationwide. The King's visit to Washington, therefore, centres on the two primary pillars of this corporate structure: the executive branch at the White House and the legislative branch at the Capitol. The White House. The White House serves as the official home and office of the President, head of the corporate executive branch. The King's engagements here include a private meeting followed by a public ceremony, each playing a distinct role in the lawful closure of the system. The private tea. This private meeting with the President and First Lady is the first face-to-face engagement. In accordance with long-standing principles of contract and trust law, the parties must first meet privately to acknowledge that the old arrangement is ending. The King, as the acting authority of the Crown in this process, formally records that the executive branch stand ready to close the Admiralty Law chapter. This quiet encounter serves as the initial living testimony, similar to two trustees confirming terms before any public signing. It is the private closing of the old contract. Only after this private agreement does the public ceremony formally establish the transfer for the world to see. The state arrival ceremony. Excuse me. The public ceremony on the South Lawn makes the private agreement visible to the nation and the world. With the 21-gun salute, national anthems, military honours and formal addresses, the King and Queen stand on American soil alongside the President. The South Lawn holds specific significance as it constitutes physical land rather than an interior corporate space. By holding this major ceremony on the lawn, the event symbolically moves the closer of Admiralty law system from the realm of the corporate maritime jurisdiction onto the sovereign land itself. The King and Queen's presence as witnesses upon this soil publicly acknowledges the transfer that is now underway. If they are witnesses, then they're not breaking from the King's power, are they? You've really got to see that. Yeah, you do not witness a document for the witnesses. Two witnesses witness a document for the one that's created the document. So if they're acting as witnesses to this break, it is not a break from the constitutional monarchy. And that has to be understood. This act marks an important step, releasing the old jurisdiction and returning power to the land and the people. This ceremony is the key public declaration that if it is, why didn't they just say it? The next phase of the lawful process. See, they have to be careful what they say. This is what they want people to think. But if this is exactly what it was, then that's exactly what they would have said. And Trump would have been running on that all the time, would he not? Why not? Why would he not? You know, Lincoln were very clear that if it wasn't for the sinister operations of the Jesuits, the Civil War would never have happened. It was the Jesuits that were running that Civil War. The British Empire is just a subdivision of this Holy See system that would appear to have been put in place from the mid-1400s. Let's have a look. Addressing Congress, the Capitol building, the King is scheduled to address a joint session of both the House and Senate inside the Capitol, a rare event. Congress is the legislative branch. It's the law-making centre of the corporate United States. It is the body that has created and maintains the corporate rules and Admiralty law system since 1871. By standing in that chamber, the King enters the very heart of the authority that established and upheld the corporate system. The speech to Congress is legislative act, meaning it belongs to the King as the sovereign authority to close the old contract with the US lawmakers. Well, hang on. He's either a witness or he is the authority. You've got to make your mind up. He can only be a witness from a break from the constitutional monarchy of England, which is Magna Carta and all the freedoms that America prides itself on. But he can only act as a witness from a break from the inner city of London, who, as the Bar Association, has subverted the constitutional monarchy by placing Parliament as sovereign and the monarch as subordinate to this so-called illegal or unlawful sovereign parliament that clearly isn't run by the politicians. So who is running this sovereign parliament? It's got to be the Bar Association. By standing in that chamber, the king enters the very heart of the authority that established and upheld the corporate. Done that. The Queen is not required for this step, as it's carried out by the king in his role with the legislative process. His authority, presence and address ensure the lawmakers themselves are physically present to acknowledge the end of that structure they maintained. In contrast and trust law, the creators and enforcers must be present when the old agreement is dissolved. This also explains why congressional arrests have not occurred prior to this event. Even under arrest, unless officially expelled, members of Congress maintain their position within the body. For the record to be complete, the full legislative body must be physically present in the chamber. If members were arrested beforehand, they would not be there to witness the ending, leaving the process incomplete. So this even of itself is a Q-form gig. They really want the American people to believe that this is a break from the yoke of the power that's controlled the United States of America. And it isn't anything to do with England, the constitutional monarch of England, but it's everything to do with Rome. To implement the new system, the pillars of the old order had to be removed. The Twin Towers stood as a powerful symbol of global trade, finance, and commercial dominance under the maritime system. Their destruction in 2001 created profound shock and chaos, intended to clear the way for the full implementation of a far more expansive system of control, the New World Order. However, despite great effort, the plan was never completed. Or was it not? And I remember when one particular guy came out, what's he called? Oh, an Italian guy. I forgot his name. He made it very clear that he knew that the entire event of 9/11 had been coordinated and carried out through the Rotary Club, which is 100% a Roman secret society front. And all the secret societies are involved in it. So again, it's misdirection, this. Instead, the American people, through their president, are now bringing the old system of law to an end and restoring the law of the land. Oh, are they? So they're going to get rid of the Patriot Act? Are they? Because that's a corporate act system. Are they going to get rid of the Patriot Act? Are they not? I'll tell you that now. Who do you think ICE is operating under? Even though the New World Order failed, Admiralty laws, rules and rituals still require proper closure. The King and Queen come as the official living witnesses from the British side for three essential reasons. The word wizardry in this is just bizarre. But to the normal, learned in how these word wizards operate, you will fall for this hook, line and sinker. Twin Towers were the commercial side of the system in operation. This is why it has called the World Trade Center. It was literally designed to be the global hub for trade and finance under Admiralty jurisdiction. They must stand at the exact location observed firsthand. Those pillars have been removed. Their presence creates the required living testimony that the old sense of commercial power have ended. Yeah, it's going into monopoly. The King's visit to Virginia. King Charles and Queen Camilla returned to the very starting point of the commercial charter system that established British Admiralty law over America. Standing at this original point as living witnesses, they signal the lawful closing of the old arrangement. This act completes the circle, releasing the old jurisdiction so that full land jurisdiction and sovereignty can return to the American people, returning them to their status as living sovereign beings under the law of the land, in contrast to the dead status held under maritime law. King's visit. In the old system of contracts, trusts and rituals, major cycles carry deep legal and symbolic weight. Exactly 250 years ago, 1776, America publicly declared its independence from Britain. Although the underlying corporate structure was later quietly re-established through corporate law, or the 250-year cycle has now come full circle. Oh, they are really playing this up. The King's presence on American soil at this precise anniversary marks the lawful completion of that cycle. In the hidden system they follow, an agreement or jurisdiction cannot be closed at any time. Major anniversaries like this one creates the proper window to end long-standing contracts cleanly and lawfully. So you're going to be able to suggest then that we can add another birth of a new system on May the 1st, like Soviet Union, for instance. Interesting, is it not? And all that's took place within the 13-day satanic height of the satanic rituals, leading up to Walpurgis Night on the 30th of April. How clever. Why America must follow Admiralty Protocol. Any transition out of Admiralty law must follow established procedure. A nation cannot simply walk away from such a system. History repeatedly shows the severe cost of attempting to bypass its rules without completing the full process. Leaders who try to break free or challenge the system without following the lawful steps face decisive consequences. Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Abraham Lincoln issued greenbacks, real US dollars issued directly by the government, interest-free, to fund the civil war outside private European banking under Admiralty control. Exactly, he did. They wanted 36% to borrow. William McKinley strongly supported the gold standard and resisted the creation of the private central bank. In the eyes of the system, this disrupted Admiralty law's financial order. So his removal was seen as a lawful correction. He was assassinated. Let's get things straight, shall we? Who runs the City of London? The trustees to this system, the House of Rothschild. Okay, that's what they think they're breaking from. John F. Kennedy challenged the Federal Reserve power and certain intelligence operations operating under Admiralty jurisdiction, acting from within the system without completing the full ritual closure, and he was assassinated. These leaders attempt to step outside or weaken the Admiralty law system within the country without following the proper law procedure. By failing to do so, the system treated their actions as rebellion and removed them. This is why the current process led by President Trump is so important. It began with the symbolic recapture of the American flag on Flag Day 225 and is unfolded through the legal steps. The final steps in American sovereignty. The King's visit provides lawful witness from the old system and marks the formal closing of the old contract. However, this is not the end of the process. The practical removal of the old corporate and Admiralty law structures, including major changes to the financial system and the accountability of key corrupt figures, must follow. That keeps the Q-tards happy. The full public rededication of the nation back to God will occur on May 17th, when President Trump, acting as a representative of the people, leads the nation in solemn prayer. This marks an important stage in the transition. The removal of the old system does not need to be complete by this time, though it does need to be underway. The period between now and May 17th is extremely sensitive. As the old system is being lawfully closed, opposing forces will see these final steps as a major threat to their remaining power. Ah, how clever is that? So they are now also, how clever is that? They are now smoke screening. They are now smoke screening what's going to take place with this digital dollar, oil, and gold. And they're going to keep Americans fixed on nonsense that by some method they're going to get the country back. How clever. What a smokescreen they're preparing there for you Americans. You really need to see through that. This is the time for Americans to pray for the president's protection, declare the desire to reclaim full sovereignty, and rededicate the nation back to God. Only then can America fully restore the law of the land, and lawfully place itself under the governance of God's appointed Son Jesus, and formally proclaim him king over the nation. Now, okay. By golly. Right. Right. Now then. Where are we? That's not worked. Wait a minute. I've done that wrong. Let me just... how did I do this before? Wait a minute. I might just have to change stuff here. I will. Here we go. We're going to go to this. Now, America. Everything we've just said there, everything that your shoes all over America are pushing down your necks, this is the reality of the matter. Okay? So this is from a guy called Michael John on North Carolina. So there are people in the US getting a grip already. These documents are not secret. They are a matter of public record. Here are truthful facts most people do not know, but should. Okay? So if you think you're coming away from the yoke because King has been over there and witnessed you break from the inner city, you need to understand this is just wind and piss. Because they're breaking up that side of things and shifting it into this new no-hide trust. Right. 1. The IRS is not a US government agency. It is an agency of the IMF, International Monetary Fund. Diversified Metal Products versus IRS et al. CV 93-405E. Public Law 94-564. Senate Report 94-1148, page 5967. Reorganization Plan number 26, Public Law 102391. Okay? So what are they playing at here? Nobody believes they're coming away from the IMF. Oh, because they don't know they're under the IMF. Because they think they're under the yoke of the British Empire. International Monetary Fund, ladies and gentlemen. 2. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, is an agency of the UN. Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, page 816. Trump decries the UN all day long, and you believe it. And you will believe it while you think the yoke that you've had is England. The IMF, which is what the IRS operates for, is an agency of the United Nations. Who created the United Nations? The House of Rothschild. This is banks, ladies and gentlemen. They are just the trustees of the Rothschilds. 3. The United States has not had a treasury since 1921. 41 Stat CH 214, page 654. 4. Sorry. The US Treasury is now the IMF presidential the US Treasury is now the IMF, or International Monetary Fund, and that's the Presidential Documents, Volume 24, Number 4, page 113 to 22. USC 285-2887. Still think you just broke away from the yoke? 5. The United States does not have any employees because there is no longer a United States. No more reorganizations. After over 200 years of bankruptcy, it is finally over. Executive Order 12803. 6. The FCC, CIA, FBI, NASA, and all of the other alphabet gangs were never part of the US government, even though the US government held stock in the agencies, and that's found as fact as in the US versus Strang 254 US 491, Lewis v. the US 680 F 2nd 1239. I don't think that's the year. Well, of course they weren't. These were the paperclip boys from Germany, bedazzling you with nonsense, specifically NASA, and sucking you dry. What did Abe Finkelstein say? They're going to suck America dry. Done dusted. Bedazzled by nonsense. Oh. 7. Social Security numbers are issued by the UN through the IMF. The application for a Social Security number is the SS5 form. The Department of the Treasury, or IMF, issues the SS5 forms and not the Social Security Administration. The new SS5 forms do not state who publishes them. while the old form states they are Department of the Treasury. 20 CFR Council on Foreign Relations, Chapter 111, Subpart B, 422.103b. 8. There are no judicial courts in America and have not been since 1789. Judges do not enforce statutes and codes. Executive administrators enforce statutes and codes. Do you get that? Executive administrators enforce statutes and codes. Because a judge and a prosecutor and a clerk are just a office. The executive administrators would be the Bar Association. Now, they have different functions. And I have said this to you before, but I'm just going to be clear on it. So, let's have a look. If we to understand, offices understand structure better than individual agents, okay? So, an agent is a copper. An agent is a civil servant, let's say. Right? But the office is a different kettle of fish. And the agents are persons. An office is an office. Now, an office like the PCC's office operates at a higher conceptual level than a frontline agent. So the police and crime commissioners on the UK know a lot more about it all than your average plod. They don't know nothing. That's exactly how it's meant to be. This is why you have problems dealing with police, because they don't know their ass from their elbow. So, an office deals with formal roles, statutory language, administrative clarity, capacity distinctions, written declarations, procedural consistency. So remember, when you're sending mail into the courts, unless you're sending it direct to the judge, you're actually sending it to the delivery manager at the court, who's an agency. So even though the judge is an office, which is where you need to be communicating declarations and such too. Yeah, it's... Now, agents deal with scripts, checklists, enforcement tasks, assumed roles, so that's your assumption that you are a person, legal person, and fused capacities, so that's the fusing of you, flesh and blood, or even natural person in the private, with that of the legal person. So you have to respond differently to these different things. So, where are we? An office is trained to recognise explicit statements, clear capacity, formal declarations, and unambiguous roles, which is up to us to present ourselves such. Whereas the agents deal with scripts, checklists, enforcement tasks, assumed roles, fused capacities, and outcomes. Yeah, we've gone through this in the last few weeks just to help you grasp not what we know should be, but what we know is, because they've changed tack again. Okay? Now, back to this. Number 10. According to GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, you must have a social security number, and that's from a House Report 103826. So GATT pulled you in America into the IMF. Not the inner city of London. You've been leaving the inner city of London for a long time. That isn't New York. 11. New York City is defined in federal regulations as the United Nations. Did you get that? New York City itself is, in federal regulations, defined as the United Nations itself. Rudolph Giuliani stated on C-SPAN that New York City is the capital of the world. And for once, he told the truth. 20 CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, Chapter 111, Subpart B, 44.103B, 2 and then 2. 12. Social Security is not insurance or a contract, nor is there a trust fund. And that was found in Helvering v. Davis, 301 US 619, Stewart Co. v. Davis, 301 US 548. 13. Your Social Security check comes directly from the IMF, which is an agency of the United Nations. It says US Department of Treasury at the top left corner, which again is part of the UN, as pointed out above. 14. You own no property. Slaves can't own property. Read carefully the deed to the property you think is yours. You are listed as a tenant. Senate Document 43, 73rd Congress, First Session. 15. The most powerful court in America is not the United States Supreme Court, but rather the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. You study the history of Pennsylvania, and you'll find Masonic poles everywhere, specifically Scottish Rite. And that comes in 42 PA CSA 502. 16. The King of England financially backed both sides of the American Revolutionary War. The Treaty of Versailles, July 16, 1782, Treaty of Peace, 8 Stat 80. 17. You cannot use the US Constitution to defend yourself because you are not a party to it. The US Constitution applies to the Corporation of the United States, a privately owned and operated corporation headquartered out of Washington, D.C., much like IBM International Business Machines, Microsoft et al., and not to the people of the Sovereign Republic of the United States of America. And that was found in a case, Padelford, Fay and Co. versus the Mayor and Alderman of the City of Savannah, 14 Georgia, 438520. 18. America is a British colony. The United States is a corporation, not a landmass, and it existed before the Revolutionary War, and the British troops did not leave until 1796. Republica v. Swears, 1st Dallas 43, Treaty of Commerce, 8 Stat 116, Treaty of Peace, 8 Stat 80, IRS publication, 6209, Articles of Association, October the 20th, 1774. And then there's a link to a video. 20. Britain is owned by the Vatican. Treaty of 1213. 21. The Pope can abolish any law in the United States. Elements of Ecclesiastical Law, Volume 1, 53 to 54. 22. A 1040 form is for tribute paid to Britain. IRS publication 6209. 23. The Pope claims to own the entire planet through the laws of conquest and discovery. Papal bulls of 1495 and 1493. Is that interesting? 1400s. 1,000-year added. Fall of Rome, the old Rome, when they took on this terrible interpretation of the gospel and called it Christianity. Well, in fact, they didn't. They called it Catholicism. Didn't they? The term Christianity, I think, is a reformed version, is it not? Correct me if I'm wrong. 24. The Pope has ordered the genocide and enslavement of millions of people. Papal bulls of 1455 and 1493 again. Them 1400s. The Pope's laws are obligatory on everyone. Benedict The 14th, D Sin Diocese Lib IXC V11 VII rather N4 Prati 1844 Syllabus Prop 282944. We are slaves and own absolutely nothing, not even what we think are our children. Tillman v. Roberts, 108 SO 62 Van Corten versus Van Corten, 154 NE 146 Senate Document 438, 73rd Congress, First Session. Weinhammer versus People, 13 New York Rep 378481. We already know this, don't we? 27. Military dictator George Washington divided up the states, or estates, into districts. Messages and Papers of the Presidents, Volume 1, page 99, 1828, Dictionary of the Estate. 28. The people does not include you and me. Barron versus Mayor and City Council of Baltimore, 32 U.S. 243. 29. It is not the duty of the police to protect you. Their job is to protect the corporation and arrest code breakers. Sapp versus Tallahassee, 348 SO 2nd 363. REIFF versus City of Phila, I think that's Philadelphia, 477 F 1262. Lynch versus NC Department of Justice, 376 SE 2nd 247. So there's case law coming out your ears. 30. Everything in the United States is up for sale. Bridges, roads, water, schools, hospitals, prisons, airports, etc. Did anybody take time to check who bought Klamath Lake? Executive Order 12803. 31. We are human capital. Executive Order 13037. The World Cabal makes money off the use of your signatures on mortgages, car loans, credit cards, your social security number, etc. 32. The UN, or United Nations, has financed the operations of the United States government, the Corporation of the United States of America, for over 50 years. US Department of Treasury is part of the UNC above, and now owns every man, woman, and child in America. The UN also holds all the land of America in fee simple. Remember, who controls the UN? The Rothschilds. And then there's just a lot of comments, which... Right, so that's that last part is the data I got about an hour before, which I just read and thought, my word, this changes slightly. Because, of course, my beef was with Charlie Boy and what he's been doing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But that is an interesting point, whoever made that about him having to be quiet here. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, to be quite honest. But what a pussy. What an absolute pussy he is. And his sons as well. They're just pussies, aren't they? Let's be honest. Right, I'll just have a look at what you lot say, and then we'll just jump onto this. Oh, actually, that's not took too long. That's quite good. Right. Anna says, looks like theatre to conceal terms of surrender. Oh, I think it's a big smokescreen. And if they can get the Americans to believe that everything's going fantastic, they're not going to pull to pieces what's going to take place next with this financial stuff and this clear alliedship with Putin. I mean, what's actually going on here? That's what I want to know. What's going to happen to Europe? You know, what is the plan for Europe? It's not good, is it? And I mean, as much as I don't wish it, but it looks like the white race is really on its back foot here. And I'll just give you one more piece that I put up earlier, which is very telling also, and that is so I put two images up because Abe Foxman if you're aware of the ADL, you know who this man is. Now, I don't know exactly at what point he said this, but he said, "Men, we now control the destiny of this race. It is now time to make sure the white race becomes extinct through miscegenation and having a virtually zero birth rate." And that's Abe Foxman, Jewish former chairman of the ADL. And that works in sync with Abe Finkelstein. And then we've got this that Trump has just set up, and of course Washington, D.C. being its centre, the Office of Strategic Capital, or OSC, has been established as the Department of War's internal investment bank, a novel and powerful tool for revitalising the national security industrial base. The OSC wields approximately $210 billion in lending authority. This capital is instrumental in supporting the nation's national security supply chain, providing the financial resources necessary for companies to scale production, invest in research and development, and modernise their facilities. This direct financial intervention helps to de-risk investment in the defence sector and ensure that critical industries have the capital they need to thrive. Now, my suggestion is that is basically them. Oh, you couldn't see that, could you? I believe that's them privatising the entire huge American military. I'm just going to give you that because you didn't get to see them. So my apologies there. Oh, what's happening here? Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to have to do a little bit of messing around anyway because... So let me just see that you can... So these were these two pieces. There's Abe Foxman. Can you see this? So that's Abe Foxman speaking about full control of the white race. And then you've got this Secretary Pete Hegseth speaking about the OSC. And I just think that's privatising the American military, which means putting it 100% into the hands of the United Nations. And of course, as long as these shills can bedazzle the Americans, what's actually happening is you're breaking from the yoke. You won't see what you need to see. So I hope Americans get to see that, because they are really being pressured into accepting this garbage that they've actually just been freed. And that is not a good thing at all. Book of Revelation talks about the beast of the sea rises and places one foot on the land, giving power to the beast. Yeah, definitely a recognition of the Admiralty. 10 kings. He even speaks about two witnesses in the Book of Revelation. Book of Revelation and Book of Daniel are the orchestrated scripted theatre they are going to use to bring about their new exilic system. Yeah, I mean, and if you get into the Jesuit lore, which I did many years ago, they were very clear that what they'd done is rehash what has been, represented it, and then it sounds to me like this were done, just, launched in the mid-1400s, if we take that added 1,000 years into consideration. And they call it futurism. So they've taken what was, reinstituted it, thrust it out onto everybody, and everybody's made it happen. Talk about history repeating itself. I mean, is this what they've always done? It wouldn't surprise me. Which is why, until man breaks out of this prison by, having the courage to deal with himself. And it's not easy. People don't like looking at themselves. Because we're in such a mess. It's difficult, and that is the difficult path. But it's the path of the teaching of Yeshua. Regardless of this nonsense that people have believed. It's beyond my comprehension that people have actually believed this stuff. Jerry says, post office, the post you hold in the office of. The post you hold in the office of. Post office, the post you hold in the office of. Yeah, I get your drift. Shifting the legal Roman system into their extra-light version of God's law, how else would they be able to reset the world? Absolutely, and that's what this is. But I don't think the Americans are going to see this. Because they're just so... it's a rebel it was built on rebellion. It's where all those Europeans run off to get away from these psychopaths here, these Venetians. So and this is what they've played to a T through Trump. Make America great again. These were all picked up through all the social media trolling. And, this is the data they saw that everybody in America were using these phrases. And in the first gig that Trump, started to run for president, it was faltering until, what's he called? Robert Mercer pulled in this data and gave him these buzz phrases. And as soon as he started speaking these buzz phrases, it resonated with every single American because that's what they were all talking about. It's so... But we've broke the spell. We've broke the spell, let's put it that way. Get another layer of spells trained for the next generation to get lost in on the path, yeah. No wonder they want them voting at 16, eh? The Union Jack has hung upside down indeed, yeah, I've seen that as well. Britain is in distress, it certainly fucking is. So, okay, let's say that the king has took this opportunity to speak what he can't speak here, and he's gone and done it in America. What do we make of that? Are we to go and say, right, come on in, Uncle Sam? Because if America's going under fascist dictatorship, because it's just out of sight, and we call in Uncle Don, because I think, to be quite honest, we're in that such of a state today with these Bolshevik fucking fruitcakes, and so many English are just so fucking stupid. It would take some support, like from America, for us to turn this around. I mean, there's enough white males in this country to turn this around in a day, if we got our act together. But with no arms, so we are disadvantaged in so many ways. It would take something like that, but we have to be careful. Would that be another ruse? Perhaps. Not saying I'm poo-pooing it, because it would be an essential part, but only if America were back to its republic, land law, Magna Carta, come on in, lads, let's sort out these Johnny-come-latelys who are trying to overturn the England that we all grew up in. That would be a necessary evil, without a doubt. And like I said last week, I'm sick of listening to these apologists for Islam like it's some kind of fantastic... It isn't, ladies and gentlemen. There is no house of peace in Islam. It's a war doctrine. There's only peace when everybody's converted. And if you can't see that, it's because you've not read the book. Or you're listening to the lies that are being promoted by those that are allowed to lie. By 6 methods, if it promotes Islam. So I'm not having it. I've said many times, I think the Muslims that have been born here, these guys, they know the crack. They know that their grandparents left the shithole to get away from it. Do you really want that shithole coming back here? Really? Come on. I mean, the only way, there's only 2 ways that this is going to go. And that's that the Muslims that were born here see the light and realise that England is just as much theirs as it is ours, because England, as I said before, it's not actually a race. It's a culture based in law that gives you the freedom and the rights and limits the power of crown and state. That's why America were built on it. That's the beauty of it. There's no other nation on the earth like it, regardless of what shit people have been told to aim at it. It's the British Empire that caused all the problems for you out there, not England and its constitution. So if it didn't come together there, then the only way forward would be for the might of the US to arm all those natives, and we get rid of every single tosser that wants to implement something foreign to fucking England on this land. Now, Rupert Law is getting a big buzz up at the moment as well. And somebody asked me what I thought about that the other week. And you've got to remember this. You know, people get into power by speaking everything you want to hear. Right? You've just expressed with Trump how that worked. They've been collecting the data. They know what you're all saying on your social media. They know it. They know what your concerns are. They know what your grievances are. Even if you don't speak it out loud. They're following all your messages, the lot. They know it. They've got all these buzzwords. So they give you half the tail with reform. Nigel Farage, the biggest shitbag going. And then he got a party going, UKIP. Then that went fucked up, and then they got reforming. But it's still only had half of what we all want, didn't it? Well, that's deliberate. They've got in certain places. They've been in a while. We can see that they're no different than any of the rest of them. They've not kept up any of the promises. But still, because there's such a massive will from the population to support, because you've got to look at it as you're not supporting a party so much. You're saying, yeah, exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want to happen. So they're using that and pretending to be a political party. Not forgetting they've all took the fucking oath. But this is another thing. All the states took an oath to King Charles III. If King Charles III over there in America is really shouting for help, well, you only need to get your help here, pal. They've all took fucking oath to you. What you say goes. Even though it doesn't under bar, it still does in the minds of the English, because they don't know their ass from their elbow, and they still think we have de jure constitutional monarchy. So, either way, pal, if you've got the bollocks, and that's what you were saying, Christ, get back here and say it here. Get yourself out in public, get yourself surrounded by your military, and say it here. For God's sake, you know, you're Commander-in-Chief at Parachute Regiment. You only need them 3 battalions around you. You're 8. You don't need anybody else. Never mind all them crap hats. You don't need them. You know, you're not thinking, are you? Or have you handed it to your fucked up son, who's about as much fucking use, earning 20 million a year and paying fuck all in tax, making a fortune off fucking hospital car parks. So he's obviously tied in with the Knights Hospitallers. It just gets worse. You can't make this shit up. So maybe, okay, go for it. You people are there. We're all here. We don't mind treason coming back. We don't mind hanging everybody that's been fucking around in this and loved it. But we've got plenty of fucking poles out there with cameras all over the show to hang them. We don't care. We'll be happy to do that in a couple of weeks. We'll have it all done and dusted. But now they've got Rupert Law, that's where I was getting to, sorry. So, just to make sure in these elections that are coming up, that idea that they're playing with and pretending that they represent it, but actually they're just speaking what you want, just so that they don't get any more power, they raise Rupert Law out, giving you other half of what they know we all want on social media. Don't pay these fucking immigrants a penny. Fuck off back to where you come from. That's common fucking sense. Right? That's common sense. If you came in here illegal, even if you were back in 1951, you're back because you came in illegal. Because you're quick to use the legal system to get your fucking free money. Right, you support that system. That system says, fuck off. Excuse me for swearing. Get out. Go away. You know. So now you've got Rupert Law. Well, of course, what's it doing? It's dividing the vote for reform. So it just divides the vote of the energy that people are going to give to it. And while we're on that matter, there's another scam that you need to see that these sneaky sherriers are up to. Now, are you aware that in 2029, election independents and MPs can leave other parties and form a new party immediately after an election and call it Islamic Party, thus bringing in Sharia law legally? Now, look, this is just Blackburn. Independence. But what's worse than that is the Green Party is the Trojan horse for this capacity. The Green Party. It's full of shit. It's supporting all this fucking climate garbage. But they're creating a Trojan horse with this Green Party because it'll go full on Sharia. All these independents. And they can go for Conservatives, they can go for Labour. Get your vote and then jump on the shit show. Now, this is how the Muslim Brotherhood operate. This is the sneaky little fuckers. This is what they're playing at. These sneaky little bastards. So I'll say to you if you're watching, do you wish you hadn't fucking asked me what I wanted to do back then in 24? Do you wish you hadn't fucking gone down that path? Because you're not smart enough. You're not that clever. You know? But that's who's pushing that. Palafacini. It's cute what they're playing at. Very, very cute, but I don't like it. So, if Uncle Dom wants to come in here and arm us to teeth, we'll sort this out in 5 minutes. But I don't know. It's an interesting concept. Because I hadn't actually thought of it like that until somebody put it up on there. That could have been. But even so, it just shows they're not fit for fucking purpose, these people. Fringe flags symbolise they are talking in fictional language. Well, gold fringe, of course, because the album says it's all fiction, I'm dead. So yeah, quite right. They are not our people, Sean. We shouldn't expect anything from them, except grief, absolutely. He's going for Russia. Goal is to reduce the Gentiles, and they are succeeding. Well, it's not that they're reducing the Gentiles. The fucking Gentiles are jumping on board on all sorts of nonsense. They're all jumping onto this fucking faggot stuff so that there's no procreation. They're all thrusting the fucking wrecking their families, not looking after their offspring, so their offspring are being brought up by the state. What can you expect? You know, it's symbiotic, this whole thing. They can only suggest and then hope you jump on board. But if they suggested tomorrow and nobody jumped on board, it's dead. It doesn't happen. The script only works when they can employ actors. And that's you. And that's you. And you can't go back on what's been and change. You can only change yourself right now. But that takes a lot of self-examination. And most people don't like to be wrong. Most people don't like to be outed on their own nonsense. They don't like it. They can't cope with it. Because they haven't got any courage to face the self. It's much better to blame everybody else. You know, if you look, this is a matter that you can take on board for yourself if you want to get on the spiritual path. Sit down at some point and just consider what really drives you up the wall. What behaviour in people around you, or one person in particular that you've got a gripe with. Analyse that behaviour that really makes you trigger. Right? And then have a look at yourself and whether you actually operate in that way and you've never seen it for yourself. Because when you start to look at it like that, what you tend to find is a lot of people out there that really trigger you, they're mirroring. There is a mirror for you to see. They're showing you a part of yourself that you can't face. And what do? We project it out on them. Oh, well, attack it over there. They shouldn't be doing that. It's disgusting. I will sit in judgment on you and change you. Actually, if you really analyse it, you'll find that you are operating in that manner. It might not be full blown, but there'll be a part of you, in a little part of your gig that you in your day to day, where you're actually operating in that very same manner. And that's how I learnt. That's how I transformed my nonsense and became fantastic and amazing. Well, I haven't finished yet. There's still more to be done. There's always little sneaky shit things that pop out at you and everything. And you go, oh, well, fuck me, I didn't know that was there. But you know what? I'll laugh at myself. Instead of most people go, oh, I think guilt. I have to hide it. I must spend the rest of my life hiding that fact from everybody. And most people fucking know anyway. So it's a complete nonsense that we play this little game, this little dance with ourselves. I must keep that secret forever and ever. Amen. And you fuck then. You've imprisoned yourself in this nonsense. Can't do this, can't do that. That might happen. It might come out. Before you know it, you're a fruit bat. And then you believe in all these toss bags that come out with all sorts of shit. Say, well, we'll look after you. You have this fucking juice. Stick that in your head. Stick it in your kids. Get it in your kids. Yeah, be right. Believers, trust us. We know what we're doing. And away you go, you're fucked. Observer says, his going for Russia goal is to reduce... they are succeeding, yeah, I think so. I think they're going to try and entice Russia into kick shit out of everything. Well, actually, no, if the war starts with that, there's a conscription in it. You don't forget the Kalergi plan. Tells you in there what the plan is. And I fucking listened. I shouldn't have done this. This really pissed me off. I mean, I listen to radio once sometimes a day just to see what the fucking shit's going on. But Friday night, I was tossing about in the kitchen and I put radio on. Oh my God. Dance music, right? No, so has now got, I thought I were in fucking Africa again. I thought I had to go in garden and build a mud hut. They're putting African shite all over house music beats. And then in between, you've got the DJs going, yeah, just really forcing it down kids' necks that this is the game. You've also got, I noticed, Asian shit coming in as well on our fucking music. They are force-feeding our younger generations this fucking subculture shit. And we know it's aimed at the females, because if they can get the white males fucking conscripted, you females are screwed. You're going to have funny coloured babies. And even like I'm with Muhammad Ali, everybody wants the children to look like them, their offspring, don't they? You don't want it to look like a strange thing that doesn't know which set of genetics it's supposed to be following. I mean, the shit you put into a child when you mix the blood, it doesn't know which fucking programming to take on. They call it Back to the Future. We're in a loop as it's all resets. Yeah. It's quite ridiculous, isn't it, really? When you just sit down and contemplate this stuff properly, it's outrageous. Okay, so now I just need to... I might have to do a bit of jigging here. Which one are we on? There we go. Now I have to sort this out because I've massacred this. Look at that. Not went too bad. The old world, according to a giant. And I just thought this is interesting, this. And so, of course, when I'm speaking of old world, we're speaking of architecture such as... Oh, what have I just done? What have I just done? Oh, yeah. Okay, I've just not got quite get it right. Okay. Hopefully. That's somewhat like... Okay, so that's the kind of architecture we're talking, aren't we? That these Johnny-come-latelys that took over everything after this catastrophe have claimed is theirs. I don't think so. Right. So, in 1884, a prison guard named Samuel Whitmore walked into a cell block 7 for the last time. The man he'd been feeding seconds for 3 years was dying. Feeding seconds, I think. The man he'd been feeding for 3 years was dying. But this wasn't just any prisoner. This was a giant, 9 foot 4 inches tall. And what this giant told Whitmore in his final hours would challenge everything the world believed about human history. The giant's name was recorded as John Robertson, though Whitmore would later learn this wasn't his real name. Robertson had been arrested in 1881 on charges of vagrancy and disorderly conduct. The real reason for his arrest was simpler. He was too tall, too visible, and too much evidence of something the authorities wanted hidden. Over 3 years, the two men developed something rare in a prison: trust. Robertson told Whitmore things, not all at once, not in clean, organised stories, but in fragments. Late at night, when the rest of the cell block was quiet, he talked about a world that existed before the one Whitmore knew. A world where men like him weren't anomalies, they were normal. So we all lived in happy harmony, and these big fellas called Gulliver. He described cities with buildings that stretched higher than any structure in Pittsburgh, not made of brick or wood, but of white stone that seemed to glow in sunlight. Robertson called it marble, but not like any marble Whitmore had seen. This stone was seamless, massive blocks fitted together so perfectly you couldn't slide a knife between them. No mortar, no cement, just stone on stone, held by precision and weight. The buildings weren't just tall because they could be, they were tall because the people who built them were tall. Robertson described doorways that stood 12 foot high as the standard ceiling, 20 foot up in residential buildings, public halls with ceilings that soared 50 or 60 feet, held up by columns as thick as oak trees. He talked about roads that ran for hundreds of miles in perfect straight lines connecting massive population centres that no longer appeared on any modern map. These weren't dirt paths or cobblestone streets. They were paved with the same white stone as the buildings, wide enough for 6 carriages, side by side. And they never cracked, never broke apart. Some of them were still there, Robertson said, buried under modern roads. If you dug deep enough in the right places, you would find them. Whitmore thought Robinson was insane at first, a tall man with delusions, spinning fantasies to pass the time. But then Robertson started describing specific locations, places Whitmore had actually been, and the details were wrong in a way that made them right. Robertson described a great exhibition hall in Philadelphia, but not the one Whitmore knew from the Centennial Exhibition of 1876. He described an earlier structure, far larger, with a glass dome that could be seen for miles. A building that Robertson claimed had been torn down and rebuilt smaller before the official exhibition. Whitmore had heard rumours about this. Old-timers who swore the exhibition grounds had been different before construction began. Foundations that seemed too large, streets that didn't line up with the official plans. Then Robertson described the Chicago World's Fair, except the fair hadn't happened yet. This was 1883. The fair wouldn't open until 1893, but Robertson described it in perfect detail. The white buildings, the massive scale, the temporary nature of the structures built to be demolished after the event. Now, I've said this all along. These exhibitions were just what were there, and it gave them the ability to smash them down. Whitmore asked how he could possibly know this. Robertson smiled. He said it wasn't a prediction, it was a repeat. The fairs weren't celebrations of progress. They were cover stories, excuses to tear down what remained of the old world and replace it with something smaller, something controllable. It became clear to Whitmore that Robertson wasn't just a prisoner. He was being deliberately kept in conditions designed to shorten his life. In March of 1884, Robertson collapsed in his cell. Whitmore found him on the floor, struggling to breathe, blood coming from his mouth. The prison doctor was called, but took 4 hours to arrive. By then, Robertson knew he was dying. He asked Whitmore to come close. What he said next would haunt the guard for the rest of his life. Robertson began with a simple statement. The world had been reset, not once, but multiple times. The civilization Whitmore knew, the one that celebrated progress and industry and the steady march of human achievement, was built on the ruins of something far greater. And the people in power knew it. He described a catastrophe that happened in the early 1800s. Not a war, not a plague, something environmental. A shift in the earth itself that destroyed most of the major cities and killed off a massive percentage of the population. Robertson said it happened over the course of several years, not all at once. First came the earthquakes, not isolated tremors, but rolling waves of seismic activity that lasted for months. Buildings that had stood for centuries came down in days. Then came the floods, massive walls of water and mud that swept through valleys and buried entire cities under layers of sediment. Robertson said you could still see it if you knew what to look for. The first floors of old buildings that were now basement. The windows half buried in mud, the doors that opened onto nothing but packed earth. This wasn't gradual settling, this was rapid burial. After the physical destruction came the atmospheric changes. The sky itself seemed different, Robinson said. Darker, thicker, the air harder to breathe for those who were tall. His parents told him that the old world had different air, lighter, richer, in something that allowed people to grow larger, live longer, and heal faster. After the reset, that quality was gone. The survivors were the smaller ones, the average-sized humans who could adapt to the new conditions. The giants, the tall ones, the remnants of the old civilization, they struggled. Their bodies required more of what the air no longer provided, and they were systematically hunted down. Robertson himself had been born in 1831, just after the catastrophe. His parents had hidden him in rural Pennsylvania, keeping him away from cities, away from authorities, and away from anyone who might report his existence. He grew up knowing he was different, but not understanding why until his parents told him the truth before they died. They told him about the old world, the one before the reset, where men of his height were common, where the buildings weren't just tall because they could be, but because they needed to be, where energy was free, harvested from the air itself through massive towers that dotted every major city, where travel happened not by horse or steam engine, but by technologies that the new world had deliberately forgotten. His parents had been part of the old educated class. They watched the systematic destruction of their world, libraries burned, records altered, maps redrawn, history rewritten to make the new world seem like the only world that had ever existed. And giants like Robinson were living proof that the official story was a lie, so they had to disappear. Robertson told Whitmore about the others. There had been more, many more. In the 1850s and 60s, they were rounded up under various pretenses. Vagrants, criminals, freaks, some were placed in asylums, others in prisons. A few were displayed in circuses and sideshows, turned into entertainment to discredit the truth of their existence. Make them seem like aberrations, not evidence of a lost world. He described a network of families who hid giant children, keeping them in basements, in attics, in remote cabins, far from towns, binding their growth with restrictive clothing and limited diets, trying desperately to keep them small enough to pass unnoticed. Most of these children didn't survive to adulthood. The ones that did lived in constant fear. Whitmore asked why. Why go through so much effort to hide the existence of tall people? Robertson's answer was simple. Because accepting that giants were once normal meant accepting that everything else might be wrong. The timeline, the history, the story of human civilization, climbing slowly from primitive beginnings to industrial glory. All of it falls apart if you admit there was something greater before. Well, this is exactly what I've always said. They have to destroy this architecture, unless it's they keep it as cathedrals and say it's religious, so obviously God made it, you know. But everything else had to go. It's so fucking blatant, and it always has been to me. They had to destroy the old to make you all think that you're fucking evolving from a monkey. And how many people act like monkeys? Well, look what happened in 2020. The people in power after the reset weren't the most advanced. They were the survivors, and survivors don't build empires by admitting they're living in the ruins of a better world. They build empires by convincing everyone that this is as good as it's ever been. Progress only moves forward, never back. Robertson grew weaker as he spoke. And this is what they've taught the kids in the schools, that they are the greatest thing that's ever been fucking born. And that we're all older ones, we've wrecked everything. Whitmore begged him to rest, but the giant refused. He said this was his last chance to tell someone who might actually listen, someone who might actually remember. He talked about the architecture, the massive buildings that still stood in cities across America and Europe, the ones built in a style they called Beaux-Arts, or neoclassical. Robertson said those buildings weren't built in the 1800s like the plaques claimed. They were remnants from before, repurposed, retrofitted, given new dates and new stories to hide their true age. He described how he'd seen it firsthand. In 1876, during the brief period before his arrest, he had tried to live openly in Philadelphia. He watched construction crews working on what they called a government building, but Robinson saw them uncovering old foundations, massive stone blocks that were already there. Buried under decades of mud and sediment, the crews built on top of them claimed the whole structure as new, and no one questioned it. He talked about the world's fairs that were coming. Chicago in 1893, Buffalo in 1901, St. Louis in 1904. These weren't just celebrations, he said, they were erasure events. Build massive temporary cities that showcase the supposed height of modern achievement, let millions of people see them, then tear them all down within months, and claim it was always meant to be temporary. Meanwhile, destroy what was really there before and replace it with smaller, controllable versions. Whitmore asked if there was any proof, anything Robertson could point to that would convince others. The giant laughed, a wet rattling sound. He said the proof was everywhere, in the size of the doorways, the old buildings, in the height of ceilings that served no practical purpose, in the massive foundations buried beneath modern cities, in the photographs that showed different versions of the same building, in the mud flood layers visible in city excavations where first floors had become basements overnight. But proof didn't matter, Robertson said, because people don't want to believe. They've been lied to on that scale. It's easier to call the proof coincidence. Easier to say the giant is crazy. Easier to move on with life in the world you know, the world as you know it. Robertson's breathing became laboured. He reached out and grabbed Whitmore's arm with a grip that was still impossibly strong despite his dying state. He made Whitmore promise something, not to prove the story, not to convince the world, but just to remember. To know that the official version of history is written by the ones who benefit from forgetting. He told Whitmore about one final thing, the energy towers. Before the reset, every major city had them, massive structures that pulled electricity from the atmosphere and distributed it freely to the entire population. No coal, no steam, no fuel needed at all, just the natural resonance of the earth itself. Robertson described them in detail. They weren't simple poles and masts, they were architectural masterpieces built from the same white stone as everything else, rising hundreds of feet into the air. At the top was a sphere or a dome made of copper or bronze, polished to a mirror shine. These captured the atmospheric charge, Robertson said, drew it down through the structure and into underground channels that distributed power to every building in the city. The towers had no another purpose too. They healed, Robertson claimed. His parents told him that people would gather near the towers when they were ill. The energy field they generated somehow accelerated healing. Broken bones mended in days instead of weeks. Infections cleared without medicine. The old world had no need for hospitals the way the new world did, because the towers provided what the body needed to repair itself. After the reset, these towers were the first things destroyed. Some were torn down completely, their materials scattered or buried. Others were repurposed, turned into monuments or observation decks or transmission towers for the new controllable grid. The knowledge of how they actually worked was systematically erased. Anyone who tried to rebuild them or even study them too closely found themselves facing consequences. Accidents, arrests, mysterious deaths, Robertson said. If Whitmore ever saw a structure that seemed too tall or too ornate, too perfectly designed for no clear purpose, he should look closer. Check for copper domes that had been removed. Look for underground chambers that seemed to serve no function. Notice if the building sat in an intersection of old roads or waterways. These were the telltale signs. It was probably a remnant, a tower that had been stripped of its true purpose and given a new story. The journal itself ceased publication in 1884, so that was the Journal of Whitmore. And there we've just got some more data that just further supports what he's said, which of course we don't need to go through. But, you know, it makes you think, doesn't it? What is this Book of Enoch? Is it just garbage? Is it just garbage and a part of this very recently formed bad translation of the teaching of the man? Is it just all wind and piss, every bit of it? Put back into ancient times, the flood, and is it just so garbage that it's ridiculous, you know? And then, you know, if that's the case, then even Jason Brashears is playing into it. Because he's fixing this timeline way back into chronology, as though it make you think. Even though he's opposing it, he's actually supporting it as well. And it just, I don't want to decry the guy because he's done some good work, and I've enjoyed, when I used to watch him, I enjoyed some of his gigs. But it just, if everything's 1,000 years closer, makes a lot of sense, does not? And then it explains why they needed all these orphan trains at the end of the 1800s into the early 1900s, getting rid of the grown-ups and putting these kids in and then sending them all over the place, removing their historical knowledge because there were no grandma or granddad there, and force-feeding them this garbage. They don't know no different. And that's been going on from everywhere. They were sent to Ireland, from here to Australia to America, all over the show. The first slaves in the Americas were all white, mainly Irish. It's all... And I was listening to one of these shills who were talking about bigging Trump up for, saving America. And do you know what the cheeky bitch had the audacity to say when she was slagging off the Brits? That the British Empire reinstalled slavery. The British fucking Empire demolished slavery. Thank you very much. And they demolished slavery knowing full well that the entire raft of people that run it claimed to be Jewish. So they are talking absolute shit, these shows at the moment. And I've watched them in this week because I wanted to see how the Americans were taking the charade over there in Washington, D.C. And I think tonight we have cracked some word spells, some wizardry. If people are prepared to just think a little bit deeper than you might do as normally, because we are in a mess. So I'll just finish off with what he said. Yeah, law, he's into all sorts of shit. So he's giving you the other half of what they know they're all concerned about to just make sure that our wishes of the natives doesn't actually gain any power in votes. Just separate the thingy. You've got Tommy the shitbag coming back. Is he me the fucking... Somebody was sending me some stuff over the week, some images. A lot I can't open, but there's one there. When he run off saying, I guess I'm a target. I guess. Well, that means you don't fucking know, you little prick. He's in fucking £400 a night hotels. While you lot are holding hope in him. He's just bigging up Shulman, giving him $100,000 for his little next escapade on there. Shulman is the cause of this anti-Islam agenda. But Islam doesn't help itself, neither. So, on the one hand, I'm not decrying the points he makes, because in a lot of cases it's correct. But it's the angle that he's coming from and the intention that they're trying to create in everybody on division that I don't like. But I'm not decrying the fact that we do have a problem. We do have a major group of immigrants in this country who are trying to install a foreign law system on this land, which is against English law. I've explained many times how their understanding of the Quran themselves is not how the Quran should be understood, and that the Sharia law that you're submitting to, because that's what you submit to, you're only submitting to the Quran if the Sharia law represents the Quran. And I'll state clearly, again, it doesn't. The current Sharia law that you're all submitting to does not represent the Quran. So you're kafir, whether you like it or not. So as much as I've tried to balance it, and I do, because peace has got to be the aim all the time, we have to recognise that there is this great big move, and at the back of this is the Muslim Brotherhood. They're the money. They're the secret society subversion behind it all, amongst other groups tied to them. But there's where all your mosques belong, your banks. And it's sad. It's a sad state. But like I've said, it's ignorance that's running this show. It doesn't matter what you're claiming to believe. You're running on ignorance. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a believer of anything. You'd know stuff. Let's have a look. What's Treen saying? I've observed through that every single organised religion is split. Jew, Muslim and Christian, even Hindu. It's that they're discernible. Yeah, it's tight, you know, because nobody's actually, they don't believe. Fringe round the flags. Yeah, Law made a fortune out of the Jabberoos, says Stream. Funded by the you-know-who's. Divide and conquer usual crap. But it's not even the Jews that are running this. There's a force outside of all this that's controlling all these belief systems. And they'll call themselves whatever they think they need to call themselves at any given stage. And whichever country they're in. It's that very mindset that keeps this division going. And just look at the performance they've done on this stabbing in London. It's so blatant. But then if the Met Police are being ordered out to behave from Virginia, that place that Charlie Boy visited, the Met Police is being fully controlled from Virginia by one company. Well, the Met Police are controlling all the forces, aren't they? Because they're all corporate. You've got to see this game. What's going on in America? Because if America's going to become the next Fourth Reich ideology, then we don't want it coming in here, do we? Like that. If that's what Charlie Boy were doing. So is Charlie Boy playing a fake up? A blag? Another blag? I'd say so. Because if he can't say it here, he wouldn't say it over there, knowing full well he's got to come back here. He's not that courageous. There's a game on here, and it wants unpicking. Talmud Sherry and Noahide, same gig. Interested that those tiny hats brag that they intend to use Muslim people. Yeah, and it's working. As the broom. But they'd be wrong, actually, as far too many of them are awake and know who's behind it. They know who ISIS worked for, and it wasn't Muslims. Good. Then let's start coming together a little bit more, because, you know, what else can I do apart from speak my truth? Really, the only hope we have on this nation, especially given what we've just looked at tonight, with what may be going on in America, is if everybody born on this landmass recognises that what we have in common is that we like growing up with that freedom, and we don't like it being taken away by what's coming in now, and that includes Sharia law. Yeah, your grandparents left that shit to come here and built a future for you. They've knocked them all off in 2020, remember, the old school. Are you going to give it them back? Are you going to undo everything your grandparents did and hand it back to that shit show? And lose what it is you grew up with like I grew up with? That'd be stupid. And the way to beat the likes of Tommy Robinson and Elon fucking Musk and all these asswipes that are supporting law like he's some kind of fucking hero, we'd beat them. We'd wipe the floor with them. And we wouldn't have to lift a finger. We wouldn't have to lift a finger. Well, I hope they are awake. And I do know a lot that are awake. And, you know, I get a lot of smiles off some of them. But, you know, the thick ones. You know what I mean? Anna Eximander. Castles. Oh. Jerry says, a sideshow. But there is some that have no clue, just like the... Yeah, exactly. It's an ignorant game. That's ignorance is... If you're ignorant, you've had it. Anna Zamanda gives us a genie. Oh, yeah, they're bringing the gin in. I've watched them. Not many really comprehend what the bigger picture is, but they will, and didn't believe the powers that will succeed. They'll only succeed if they can get us to act. I recommend YouTube's Baltimore Facts for this subject. YouTube's Baltimore Facts. I recommend YouTube's Baltimore Facts for this subject. I'm not sure what you mean there, Yulik, unless it's called Baltimore Facts. Is that right? Not many really comprehend what the bigger picture is, but they will. All right, I read that. Also, I was thinking why they need to keep using the same effing scripts. Because they work. Because you'd think they'd know better if it didn't work the first time, but sadly they are not creative enough. Same old, same old. Sayro Senna. Erin. 1. Yup. Welcome. Mew says, good evening, Treen. Wishing you all a wonderful week ahead. Good night. Well, that's Mew gone. Population control. Hard to manage the peasants once they wake up. Yep. Voting lol, says Anna. Yeah, I know. And Hewlett gives it the Gluck Mew. Right, and on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I shall say, mods, thanks for modding. Thanks for joining, and thanks for taking part, as always, and I hope that made a bit of sense. But for goodness sake, if you've got any American friends, make sure they get a watch of this, because if they can get away with this smoke screen, they're going to get away with exactly what they're doing while they play with this money side of things now. So there we go. Well, as always, what can I say except till the next time.
electronic, electronic.